Hey everybody, this is Mr. McKee again with Net 125. Today I'm going to be going over Packet Tracer 10.3.4, which I want to make this a little bit bigger. Alright, so it's connecting a router to a LAN. Alright, notice we got a pretty, I wouldn't say intense, but a more complicated and more in-depth topology than normal. Alright, we have two routers connected together with a serial connection. Off each router you have two connections to switches. So basically four separate LANs. Alright, you have a network right here in the center also. Alright, so R1, you have 2 gigabit interfaces, one serial interface. R2, basically the same thing. And each PC has IP address and connected to a default gateway. Alright, notice here each PC has a separate default gateway. Right? And pretty much nothing really sticks out here. Just notice the subnet mask. It's a /30 255.255.255.252 because that is a router-to-router connection. So /30 you can have 4 addresses, and then one address is taken up by the network address, which is right here, the .224 address, and then you have a 225 and 226, and then 227 is the broadcast. So setting it up like that, you don't waste any of your IP addresses, especially if they're internet routable addresses. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Actually, you know what I'll do? I'll make this a little bit bigger. All right. So in this activity, you will use various show commands to display the current state of the router. You will then use the addressing table to configure router Ethernet interfaces. Finally, you will use commands to verify and test your configurations. All right. Note the routers in this activity are partially configured. Some of the configurations are not covered in this course, but they are provided to assist you in using verification commands. So I guess more than likely the serial connections don't need to be configured. Alright, so display router information. Display interface information on R1. So let's click R1. Go to CLI. Notice we're booted up. Alright. Right here, console password is Cisco. Privileged exec password is class. So Cisco. Alright. Which command displays the statistics for all interfaces configured on a router? Alright, so let's do a show interfaces. Alright, so it shows a whole bunch of statistics for each of the interfaces. You hit the space bar, it tabs down. Alright, so which command displays the information about the serial 000 interface only? Because that would be a lot better. Control C to break out of that. Show interface 000, that should work. Alright, see how that shows only the serial 000 interface? So show interface serial 000. Okay, so it asks which command displays it, and then enter the command, which I already did. Alright, what is the IP address configured on R1? And just make sure it's talking about that. Alright, there's the interface for that, or the IP address for that interface. Alright, what is the bandwidth on the serial 000 interface? 1544 kilobits. All right. Then enter the command to display statistics for gigabit Ethernet 00 interface. So to do that, I would probably do the up arrow, show interface, and then just take off the serial 000, and then type in G, hit tab, and it fills in gigabit Ethernet 0-0. Alright. So now we have that up. I know that's super hard to see, but I can't really zoom in that easily. What is the IP address? Let's see. Well, funny story. Alright. Notice how there is no IP address configured, and the gigabit Ethernet 00 is administratively down, so it's not completely configured. Alright, what is the MAC address? Now I can find MAC address where it says address right there. Alright. What is the bandwidth? Bandwidth is 000. Okay. And I would just put it in just like this. It's 1000,000 kilobits, which is going to give you 1 gigabit. Alright, but just put it down as 1 million kilobits. 2, 3, yep. Alright. Display the summary list of the interfaces on R1. So, which command displays a brief summary of the current interfaces, interface status, and the IP address assigned to them? Show IP interface brief. Right? And that shows you all the good stuff on all the interfaces. Matter of fact, I see the only interface that's actually configured is serial 000. Alright. Enter the command on each router. Enter the command on each router and answer the following questions. How many serial interfaces are there on R1 and R2? Looks like 2 on R1. R2, let's do Cisco. Show IP interface. Alright, so R1 has 2, R2 has, looks like 2. How many Ethernet interfaces are there on R1 or R2? R1 is that kind of like weird situation where it has interfaces. It won't let me click on config. Alright, there it goes. But if you guys can see that, zoom in. When they say interfaces, these switch ports, they're considered ports, not interfaces. So I'm going to say disregard those. Let's look at R2. So R2 definitely has 2 gigabit interfaces that are both Ethernet. Alright. So either way, I'll take either one, but R1 has 3 or 4, I'm sorry, it has 4 fast Ethernet interfaces and 2 gigabit interfaces. So that would technically be 6. But if you consider those switch ports as not router interfaces, but switch ports. You could say 2 or 6. All right, so step 2B number 3, are all the Ethernet interfaces on R1 the same? If no, explain the differences. Well, you have 2 that do 1 gigabit per second, and you have 4 that do 100 gigabits or 100 megabits per second. All right, so they're different. All right, display the routing table on R1. So show IP route. All right. How many connected routes are there? Use the C code. All right, so you have one route looking for C, which this is the connected network address. All right, which route is listed? Put this one right here. All right, 209.165.200.224. It's a /30 network. How does a router handle a packet destined for a network that is not listed on in the routing table? Well, what it's going to do is it's going to find the default gateway and send it out the default gateway interface. Actually, I take that back. A default gateway has not been specified on here, so it's just going to drop that packet. All right. So how does a router handle a packet destined for a network that's not listed in the routing table? It would be dropped. All right. Configure router interfaces. Configure the gigabit Ethernet 00 interface on R1. Enter the following commands to access and activate the gigabit Ethernet 00 interface on R1. All right. So it tells us exactly what it wants. So let's do enable password class config T. All right, interface gigabit Ethernet 00. All right, so it wants to assign the IP address of 192.168.10.1. The subnet mask of 255.255.255.0. All right, interface is still shut down, so if we do no shutdown, that'll turn it on. Notice we get a log message that tells us the interface has changed state to up. All right, it is good practice to configure a description for each interface to help document the network. Configure an interface description that indicates the device to which it is connected. All right, so gigabit 00, it tells us, it wants us the description to be a LAN connection to S1. All right, so R1 should now be able to ping PC1. So go end, and then ping 192.168.10.10. Right. First ping request times out, which is normal. All right, now we did it again. We're good to go. All right, configure the remaining gigabit Ethernet interfaces on R1 and R2. Use the information in the addressing table to finish the interface configurations for R1 and R2. For each interface, do the following. Enter the IP address and activate the interface. Configure the appropriate description. Verify interface configurations. Alright, so we did gigabit 00 in R1. So let's do gigabit 01. Alright. So let's do config T, and then gigabit, or interface, gigabit Ethernet 01, IP address is 192.168.11.1 with a subnet mask of 255.255.255.0. I'm going to do description right now. That is LAN connection to, first one's to S1, second one would be to S2. S2. And then no shutdown to turn it on. Alright, so it's up. Alright, now let's go to R2 and do the same thing. So enable class interface. Alright, let's do config terminal interface gigabit Ethernet 00 IP address is 10.1, whoops, 10.1.1.1 255.255.255.0 description. Alright, so gigabit 00 is going up here. We can just verify it. Doing a mouse over. Alright, it's going to S3. Alright, so we'll just do connection to S3. Then no shutdown. Alright, that one's up, and then interface that interface gigabit Ethernet 01. Alright, IP address is going to be 10.1.2.1 255.255.255.0. Description is going to be connection to S4, no shutdown. Alright, so that all should be good. And what did it say? It wants us to try to test it. Alright, where are we at? We're here. Verify interface configurations. Let's exit. Exit. Show run. Alright, so R2 connection to S3. Description connection to S3. IP address 111. We can look up here. 111, 255, 255, 0. Alright, gigabit 01, 10.1.2.1. That's right. Alright, let's check over here. Exit, exit, show run. Alright, gigabit 01, 192.168.11.1. Alright, so that's good. 10.1. Alright, I think that'll do for us. Alright, so step 3, back up the configurations to NVRAM. Alright, so remember NVRAM, do Control C to get down to the command line, copy running config to startup. Default name is fine, R2, Control C, copy. Alright, remember shortcut, copy space R space ST. Alright, so all that's been backed up, or it's been saved. Verify configuration, use verification commands to check your interface configurations. Use the show IP interface brief command on both R1 and R2 to quickly verify that the interfaces are configured with the correct IP address and are active. So let's get up both of those. Show IP interface brief. Alright, and then show IP interface brief. Alright, notice gigabits are both up on R1, gigabits are both up on R2. IP address has been configured. How many interfaces on R1 and R2 are configured with IP addresses and in the up and up state? Right, and if you look here for status, up, and then has it's wrapped the next up down to the next line. All right, so looks like R1 you got 2 gigabit internet, gigabit Ethernets and one serial that's been configured, and then over here on R2, 2 gigabits and a serial. All right. And what part of the interface configuration is not displayed in the command output? If you notice, there's no subnet mask in here listed. All right, what commands can you use to verify this part of the configuration? There's a bunch of show commands you can use. All right, I'll let you guys think of that, but the most common one is show run. See how it shows the subnet mask there. All right. Use the show IP route on R1 and R2. So Control C, show IP route. All right, how many connected routes are on each router? So you're looking for C. You got to hit it lists more, so you have to hit the space bar just to be sure. All right, so C, there's one there, one there, one here. All right, and then on the other one you have one there, one there, and one here. All right. How many OSPF, or open shortest path first, routes uses the O code? Do you see on each router? I see 1, 2 on here, and I see 1, 2 on here. All right. If the router knows all the routes in the network, then the number of connected routes and dynamically learned routes should equal the total number of LANs and WANs. How many LANs and WANs are in the topology? Let me read that again. If the router knows all the routes in the network, then the number of connected routes and dynamically learned routes should equal the number of LANs and WANs. How many LANs and WANs are in the topology? All right, so to kind of explain that, all right, looking at R1s, show IP route. Notice how the physically connected networks, you have 192.168.10.0 is up top, that's directly connected. 11.0 is directly connected. 209.165.200.224 is, where's that? Connected. All right, right there. That's connected. Those three are physically connected, and then if you add those and then add these ones that it just knows about, all right, the 10.1.1.0 up here, and then 10.1.2.0, all right, so it'll be a total of 5. So 3 LANs. All right, I know this is like a WAN connection, but 3 LANs when you're referring to this router, and the same thing for R2. R2 is physically connected to 10.1.1.0, connected to 10.1.2.0. See the C right there? If you look up here, it tells us, where's it at? C connected. All right, and then the 2 LANs it knows about, which is the 192.168.10.0, which is up top, and then the 192.168.11.0, which is on the bottom. So add those together, 3 C's and 2 O's, that'll be 5 total. All right, so in that case, referring to these would be 3 LANs, and these are 2 WANs. All right, and that's relational to the network. All right. So does this number match the number of C and O routes shown in the routing table? You should be able to answer that because I just said it. And it says, note if your answer is no, then you are missing a required configuration. Refer to the steps in part 2. All right. So test end-to-end connectivity across the network. You should now be able to ping from any PC to any other PC on the network. In addition, you should be able to ping the active interfaces on the routers. For example, the following test should be successful. From the command line on PC1, ping PC4. All right. And let me just go from memory. Ping 10.1.2.1. Is that what it is? Yeah. And then that's from PC1 to PC4, and then from command line on R2, ping PC2. All right, so ping 192.168.11.1. All right, so we get good pings both ways. All right, so that's it. So we have a dynamic routing protocol running on this open source path first. So it was able to tell us, okay, we have 2 WAN connections, but then we also have 3 LAN connections on each router. And that's it. Thanks for watching.